My family abandoned me because my sister blamed me for her divorce. I ruined her life years later with an email that revealed everything. Almost 7 years ago, my family removed me from their lives and kicked me out of the house. I, 29M, was 22 at the time and lacked the financial stability to rent an apartment on my own. What had transpired was so unexpected that I had no time to prepare, either psychologically or financially. My sister was the cause of all of this. My sister, Hannah, 37F, and I have never been close due to our huge age difference. She married her partner of 3 years, Pete, 39M, when she was 27 and they were married for 3 years. They divorced after 3 years of marriage because Hannah suspected Pete of having an affair with one of my friends. I had been living with my parents after college because I had recently begun working and wanted to save money before moving out. My parents were fine with the arrangement as well, until my sister announced her divorce. She returned home one day, crying uncontrollably, and stated that she had filed for divorce because her husband had been cheating on her for 6 months. Then she threw me under the bus for introducing my friend to him. My friend Emily, 28F, was attempting to gain weight, and Pete, who was a licensed dietitian, volunteered to help her. I had introduced her to him, and it turned out she was the one Pete had been cheating on my sister with. I was startled that this was occurring because, while Emily and I were not particularly close, I thought she was a decent lady who would never become involved with a married man. Furthermore, dishonesty was out of character for Pete as well. He was completely charmed with Hannah and only had positive things to say about her, so I found it quite difficult to think he cheated on her. I had serious reservations, but my parents immediately trusted her and did not question anything, despite the fact that she had no evidence of him cheating. They simply accepted her word for it. I'm not going to hold it against them since they would prefer their own daughter over their son-in-law regardless of who was correct. What I didn't understand was why they so quickly kicked me out simply because Hannah said so. She stormed in one day, had a tantrum, and persuaded my parents to kick me out merely because I had introduced Emily to Pete. She blamed me for destroying her marriage, and my parents agreed for some reason. I was upset and tried to stop my parents, but they refused to listen. They warned me that if I didn't leave, they would kick me out. In only one day, I had lost both my family and my home and had no idea where to go. I was sobbing on the pavement with all my belongings for about an hour before I was able to gather myself and go to a friend's house for the night. I tried phoning them every day for the next 2 days but had no success. My friend was gracious enough to let me stay at his house until I could find an apartment for myself. Unfortunately, my parents were convinced that I was in the wrong and was to blame for the divorce. My parents had actually told me that they were disgusted by what I'd done before kicking me out, which made no sense given I wasn't the one Pete cheated on. They had blocked my number, so I couldn't reach them at all. When I attempted to visit them, my mother threatened to call the cops if I did not leave. After that, I concluded they were serious and blamed me for whatever had transpired. I don't suppose I had any reason to be surprised, given that my sister was always the favorite child. My parents had never intended for a second child, so I was constantly sidelined. While I didn't care for it growing up, I had no idea it would lead to something so significant. Thinking about it now, I suppose I should have seen it coming, but honestly, I don't think anyone in my position could have anticipated something like this. Anyway, for the following few weeks, I tried to figure things out on my own. Since Hannah and my parents had effectively cut me off and I had no way to contact them, I couldn't chat with Pete since he had also blocked me, which made no sense to me. I couldn't find him either because Hannah and Pete had moved out of the house they shared and gone to live with their separate parents. So, with no way to contact anyone involved, I turned to Emily, my last choice for finding out the truth. As I previously stated, Emily and I were not very close, but I had to do what was necessary. I asked to meet with her one day and explain the problem. I questioned her if Hannah's claims about the affair were accurate and she flatly denied it. To be really honest, I believed her. Emily told me that she'd only seen Pete a few times, and just professionally, so there was nothing going on between them. She had no understanding why Hannah would say such nasty things about her. She even told me she'd had a stable partner for a couple of years and was planning to marry in a few months. She even showed me photos. What Emily told me was far more believable than anything Hannah stated. I had no proof, but I knew Hannah was lying about the real cause for the divorce. However, because I lacked proof, I was unable to return to my family, and I could not have returned without it. Back then, I was yearning to return to my family because I missed them so much, despite all they had done to me. With time, I was able to overcome it and move on with my life. I found a place and made my employment the focus of my life so that I could distract myself. I also needed to pay the bills, so it was a better way to cope than sitting around feeling unhappy. I was hurting a lot because I didn't have any other options, but I knew I had to keep on, with or without the support of my family. Years have passed and I am doing a lot better in life. I relocated from my small apartment to a much larger one, and I even proposed to my girlfriend of 2 years about a week ago. Our engagement post proved to be a game changer for me. Just a few days after that post, I received an email out of nowhere that not only revealed the full tale of Hannah's divorce, but also provided all of the answers I needed, along with documentation. My fiancée, Liza, 30F, normally just posted about us on Instagram, but the photo from our engagement ended up on her Facebook feed, where she had a larger audience. It was a public post, so a lot of people saw it, including my ex-brother-in-law Peter. He happened to be someone my fiancée met at a conference a few years ago, since she was a doctor, and she ended up joining him on Facebook, where he found me. It truly is a tiny world, and for the first time, I felt pleased with it. Pete contacted me a few days after we posted, but instead of texting me on social media, he chose to send an anonymous email. He subsequently claimed that he did this so he wouldn't feel strange about what he was doing, as it had been several years since his divorce, and he didn't want to appear like a disgruntled loser who hadn't moved on from what happened. Besides, he was the one who blocked me in the first place. So he felt strange and guilty about getting back in touch with me about something that happened so many years ago. The email contained the entire tale and documentation of what happened 7 years ago. When I finished reading it, I couldn't believe my eyes. Apparently, my sister was the one cheating on Pete, not the other way around, as she had been telling us for so long. Not only was that a massive lie, but she had been cheating on Pete with a friend of mine, just as she had accused him of. My friend Frank, 28M, worked as a clerk at a grocery store near Hannah's house back then. I would never have noticed the connection myself because I had never seen them together. I suppose they had kept it sufficiently under wraps, but not enough for Pete to find out. When questioned, Hannah told Pete that it was all my fault because I had introduced her to Frank and even told her how much he needed her help because he was an aspiring singer and she was a really excellent singer herself. She agreed to help him, and they were in love before they realized it. She even admitted that I was involved and had helped them keep things quiet for so long. All of this was obviously a fabrication, and I had no idea Frank and Hannah were up to anything. Pete was enraged when he found out and blocked my entire family, which he now admits was idiotic of him. However, he was so enraged that he didn't think much about his conduct. Of course, he told me all of this in person because the email was designed to be as impersonal as possible. He did not want it traced back to him, but I figured it out. He had provided copies of emails between my sister and Frank in which they discussed how easy it was to dupe Pete. The emails were filled with declarations of love and plans for where they would meet next. Hannah couldn't refute any of this because she signed off on the emails with her middle name, which few people were aware of. I had her dead to rights. After combing through Liza's Facebook friends, I concluded that Pete must have sent me the email. My gut intuition told me that it had to do with social networking. When I eventually discovered Pete on her friend list, I contacted him. We planned to meet a few days ago, and he informed me that he learned about what Hannah had told her family from Emily, who had met him a few years before. I had told Emily to keep my side of the story a secret, and I was cursing myself when I realized that if I hadn't said that, she would have informed Pete about it, and I would have been able to prove my innocence a long time ago. Anyway, Emily and Pete ran into one other a few years ago, and she ended up questioning him about their divorce. They started conversing and he eventually learned what Hannah had told us. He said that he wanted to speak with me about it and tell me the truth. But he didn't because he felt strange. I swear, if Pete hadn't been so easily embarrassed, my life would have been much easier. I did forgive him though, since I needed his cooperation to completely destroy my sister, and I knew he would agree. Hannah had clearly been lying to my parents in order to secure financial assistance during her divorce, and she had even thrown me under the bus for good measure, knowing that one discussion with Emily would disclose the truth. I couldn't believe someone, particularly someone related to me by blood, could be so selfish. I'm sure Hannah never bothered to correct the record, and my parents had simply accepted whatever lies she'd been giving them during her divorce. She knew that if the truth about her being the cheater was out, she would be in serious danger, and she simply couldn't risk it. That's too bad. The truth had finally come out, and I was going to use it to ruin her life, just as she had ruined mine all those years before. I had not seen my family in 7 years, so I wasn't sure if they still lived in the same house, but they hadn't moved. I checked this with an old neighbor before arriving, and I was relieved to discover that Hannah was still living with them as well. That didn't surprise me because Hannah had always been a couch slug who loathed doing her own job. If she could live with our old parents and have them perform all of her duties, she would. Anyway, 2 days ago, Pete and I unexpectedly arrived at their place. My mother answered the door, and we hardly gave her time to process what was occurring before we walked in. My father and Hannah were also present in the living room. We were back together as one happy family, but only for a short time. Their faces turned nasty as soon as we entered. My father instantly threatened us, saying he'd call the cops if we didn't leave. But I shot back, telling him he could do whatever he wanted once he saw the documents we were about to show them. My parents looked perplexed, but Hannah looked like she was about to vomit and excused herself, heading to her room. I assumed she was trying to flee, but there was no use in doing so. Pete then proceeded to show my parents the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah and Frank's correspondence, while I described the true story. Pete also told my parents that Hannah had to give up our family heirloom, my grandmother's diamond ring. In the settlement, she had to sell the ring because she couldn't afford to pay him the money. She is a high school teacher. My parents were already terrified by what we had told them, and this was simply the cherry on top. We watched the drama unfold as my father demanded an explanation from Hannah for all that had occurred. Despite all of the evidence against her, she continued to lie and cover up the truth, so my father kicked her out. He packed her belongings for her, handed her the bags and then told us all to leave their house. I didn't need to be told twice before leaving with Pete, as my sister cried and pleaded with my parents to let her back in, just like I did all those years ago. This was excellent karma, and I could not be happier. It's been a few days since then, and my sister just arrived at my house a few hours ago, insisting that I immediately make amends with my parents. I had no idea how she located me, but I informed her that I no longer owed her anything. She had ruined my life once, so I returned the favor and we were now equal. I swear she had no pride left because the moment I said that, she burst into tears and accused me of being a monster. I didn't care about her drama and closed the door as she began to sob uncontrollably. I just put on my headphones and listened to music as Liza, my fiancée, worked in her study, so that neither of us would be disturbed. Hannah eventually departed, but not before leaving a message with a marker on my door, reminding me that I was nothing more than a vengeful monster. To be honest, I see nothing wrong with what I did and have no regrets. But Hannah appears to believe that I am the villain here. I just did to her what she had done to me some years ago, only I told the truth, whereas she did nothing but lie and threw me under the bus. So what do you all think? Am I the hole who ruined my sister's life and got her kicked out 7 years after she accused me of causing her divorce? Update 1. Hannah is still troubling me, despite the fact that she was kicked out a week ago. I had to threaten her with calling the cops after she called me for the 14th time today before she stopped. I'm not sure how she found my phone number and address, but that's not what I'm interested in right now. Hannah is attempting to get sympathy from me since, apparently, a school teacher's salary is insufficient for her to support herself. But I don't think that's the case. She's just furious that she has to seek a home and pay her own rent, energy and groceries now that our parents have booted her out. I don't feel really sad for her. In case you were asking, yeah, I did block her phone multiple times, but I think she's having her pals add me to conference calls, so it's pointless. My parents are as awful, if not worse than Hannah. They found me on Facebook and saw the post announcing my engagement, so they want to be a part of my life again and have expressed a wish to attend my wedding. They have not apologized yet, but for some reason, they expect me to simply invite them to my wedding, which is meant to be a very special day for me. I don't know where these individuals get the courage to say things like this, but I'm not reacting to any of it. Liza and I have had a blast reading their texts because there's no chance they're genuine right now. It's all just very sad for them. Update 2. Hannah showed up at my house again after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was about to go for work, but she stopped me by flinging herself across the hood of my car and refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was really frustrating, so I ended up contacting the cops this time. They carried her away while she yelled and wept, attempting to paint me as the evil guy. But nobody believed her sad girl play. It took some time to file charges against her, but once I did, I left for work since I didn't want to let this minor incident spoil my day. I was confident that my parents would bail her out because she was their favorite, and I was proven correct. After getting her out, my parents texted me a lengthy message about how I was being far too harsh on them for an honest mistake they made nearly 10 years ago. It was comical since nothing about what my sister and dad subjected me to was either honest or incorrect. They knew exactly what they were doing and were fully aware of how nasty they were. Despite the fact that I had nowhere else to go, they nonetheless sent me out on the street. So now that I can do the same to them, I see no reason to be forgiving or compassionate. I texted my parents back, telling them that they had lost the right to tell me what I could and couldn't do years ago, so they should stop fooling themselves. I have not blocked them yet because I haven't had time to check my messages, but I will shortly. Hopefully, I'll be free of this entire family for good. Update 3. I just got home from work and checked my social media, only to discover that my folks had sent me yet another lengthy message. Liza and I went through it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I had ever read. I suppose the poor people are unaware that nothing they say or do today will cause me any harm. I am just giggling at how delusional and sad they are. Apparently they still consider us to be family, and they have taken Hannah back in. They've decided that both of their children need a second chance, as if I've ever done anything wrong. So while they have welcomed my sister back in, they also expect me and Liza to come to their house shortly for dinner so that we may settle our disagreements civilly before the wedding. It was bold of them to think that I would want them at my wedding in the first place. We got a good laugh at their dumb message. After that, I wrote back, indicating I had no interest in anything they had asked us to. I was content living away from them, as I had for the previous 7 years. They had shown me that I was better off without them, and I would be eternally grateful for that. I didn't need them anymore, and I didn't want their supposed forgiveness. They may continue to play happy family with my sister as they had done so far. With that last text, I blocked them for good since I no longer wanted the chuckles. I was done, and I was leaving. I'm sure they'll try to contact me in some way soon, but unfortunately for them, I'm done with it. Liza is the only family I need for now, and I'm content with just her. Unfortunately, my dad and sister have never been able to think beyond themselves, and I doubt they ever will. So the next time they contact me, they will speak with my lawyer, and that is a commitment.